Mutualism is an anarchic political philosophy based around a free market and freedom of association. Today, Fizzy the Mutualist will explain their ideology and why they don't associate with the left. How would you define mutualism?
I define mutualism as being the original framework of anarchism, emphasizing the development of anarchy through free association and mutual aid. If mutualism was developed, it would effectively create a basis for a more free society where people engage in mutual relationships and freely associate on their own accord with a given context such society exists in. The prime benefit is the decentralization of public affairs and other aspects of society into a more organic development among individuals.
So, how would the system work more specifically?
There is no strict definition by means anarchy functions as some uniform system, and thus it is impossible for me to give a simple answer to this question.
Do you personally have an ideal system you'd like it to operate by?
Ideally, there would be free markets of producers who exchange in accordance to what seems fair in their exchanges. The management of things in general would come to fruition not through authoritarian control or monopolies on violence, but rather through what individuals decide to shape things in different aspects of their lives together.
So what method would you use to prevent authoritarian institutions from forming?
In anarchy, there is a basis for the free opposition of any authoritarian control. Without the state, there is practically no basis for authoritarians to gain ground when they can be met with public hostility by those who value their personal autonomy. We even see today in present societies how anti-fascist activism is at an all-time high. Yet they are unable to do real damage to them because of state protection of authoritarian groups and organizations.
Is there a method you prefer for achieving anarchy?
When it comes to the question of developing anarchy, I typically value dual power structures over direct revolution. I also value means of counter-economics and insurrection.
Can you elaborate on dual power structures?
Dual power is the method by which groups of people form independent social bonds, forming a separate society from within a pre-existing one, forming new institutions separate from the larger state society. The main purpose of dual power is the buildup of autonomous communities that reject and eventually overtake the larger state society.
Do you see any existing or past societies as similar to mutualism in any way?
There are examples all throughout modern history of the forming of separate independent societies that exist outside of the larger state within. For the most part, I would say there are no such examples of mutualist societies of this nature. There are, however, anarchist communities and organizations that practice a form of mutualism, usually in the form of dual power, free association, and mutual aid, such as the Zapatistas in Mexico.
Do you think mutualism could actually happen within the next century?
In my opinion, I believe there are already plenty of people right now practicing things such as free association and mutual aid on small scales, effectively using a form of mutualism in a micro sense. I do believe we will make significant accomplishments within the century when it comes to further organization against state power and capitalist power over production.
So you see capitalist power as a problem? Under mutualism, what prevents capitalists from gaining as much power as they have under our modern system?
Yes, capitalists are a problem. In anarchy, once again, there is a prime basis to resist and tear down attempts at forming authoritarian structures in our productive lives. The reason capitalism cannot form in anarchy is mainly due to the fact capitalism requires state power to enforce capitalist property and their domination over producers that otherwise would have more control over their productive lives and the organization they come to in forming new firms and businesses alike.
So in that case, you don't believe in private property?
I do not oppose the notion of someone privately owning property. I oppose capitalist property as it is used to reinforce hierarchies that producers are forced to agree to, and to work under the whim of the capitalists and their control over production. Should a producer attain property through occupation use of said property, I would consider it their property.
How would you consistently separate good property from bad property? And what method would you use to take it?
The question is not so much defining good versus bad property. It is more so of how exactly one should be able to come into possession of property. That is through the occupation and use of the property that would allow the user to benefit from their ownerships, and thus define such ownership in a meaningful way beyond simple notions like signing a piece of paper. I do not believe anyone can otherwise have meaningful claim to such ownership ownership, as the ownerships have no context and no effective meaning outside of possession.
How would you prevent disagreements from arising that complicates who controls what property? Without an official outlet for who owns what prevents mob rule from deciding?
There will always be instances of conflict in our social lives, including in the cases of ownership. Who gets what? That would ultimately be handled by the parties involved, not so much the larger scope necessarily, but mainly those involved in such disputes. The main factor being how someone came to possess such property in the first place would be a main factor in such a dispute. The idea that there must be some central body that defines who owns what defeats the purpose of matters such as possession.
What are your thoughts on the argument that the capitalist structure allows for more efficiency and innovation?
I find that the proposition that capitalism as a system breeds efficiency and innovation is misguided. Capitalism creates nothing. It is the people who produce, people who innovate, people who invent and make things more efficient. There is no structure in capitalism that magically incentivizes such things.
To move on, how do you go about spreading mutualism to the public? It's obviously relatively niche as of now, so how would you get it into the mainstream?
A main move I would make is to promote mutualism as being distinct from typical communism, in that it emphasizes anti-capitalism but is open to free markets and the individual ownership of what one produces. Free association and mutual aid I would display in the most simple terms without taking away meaning from these terms that have to do with the framework of mutualism.
So you want to separate mutualism from the left?
Yes, most certainly, as associating with the left has its own issues, and making anti-capitalism more appealing to those that otherwise would remain pro-capitalist right-libertarian types could adopt the framework of mutualism and anarchism to form distinct movements and organizations to push against capitalism with anarchy.
How do you feel about the violent and often destructive methods used by self-proclaimed anti-fascists?
Most claims of anti-fascists being too violent or troublesome are espoused by the corporate media and state media that wish to depict the struggle against fascism and authoritarianism as harmful. It is very possible some people might make accidents, but that is no excuse to dismiss the struggle.
Do you have any closing thoughts or anything left you'd like to mention?
I would like to make the clear up that mutualism is not market anarchism. However, both are compatible. Mutualism is not market socialism, and mutualism is not a combination of anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism. Mutualism is the original framework of anarchism and affects all sects of anarchism to an extent.
Great. Are there any materials you want to bring up? Books, channels, etc.?
I would bring up looking at work on Center for a Stateless Society, Libertarian Labyrinth, What is Property by Pierre Proudhon, and my channel, Fizzy the Mutualist, for more information on the topic.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please press the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.